I think I want to record. Okay. Okay. So,
Good
hello.
morning,
Good morning. Um, my name is Gabriella, and I'm here with my co-host,
Sasha
Sasha.
Travathos. Good
Yes.
morning, Gabby.
Good morning. Good morning. It has been a really, really long time since October. And I was
Since
just
our since our
talking.
first our first inaugural
Our
podcast.
first, yeah, we got going, and then yeah, here we are. It's March 2nd today. Anyhow, just a little explanation. I do hope that we're gonna try to do this at least weekly, or put a podcast out at least weekly. We might do like all the other podcasters and do a few at a time, and release them. But true to the founding of the Brazen Mavens, and that's the Brazen Maven Society is the name
Society.
of the podcast. And we are here for pretty much anyone over 50, and what life is like over 50, discussing all the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. There's just a lot, and it is definitely a very distinct time of life, especially for um, these days. I mean, things have really changed a lot, and 50 is not what it was when we were growing up. So there's a lot of living to do and not a lot of guidance.
Absolutely. And
People,
it's we tried to get this going. Let's talk a little bit about what happened because we both had great intentions
yeah.
and we were so excited
Mhm.
and we kind of just did one off the cuff, like, okay, let's get this done.
Let's
Let's
do it.
let's be
Yeah.
brave. Let's be Raven Mavens or
Mhm. Yeah.
Brazen Mavens rather.
Yeah.
um, what happened? Talk to us about it.
So, we have so many things to discuss, and I had an elective surgery in September, so we had to put things off, and I was okay to do the first inaugural podcast on. I think we did it October 7th, pretty sure. So then I thought, I'm free and clear. Here we go, and let's do this. Very shortly after. I spoke with my dad on the phone, and I wasn't speaking to him very often anymore. He was kind of, they were starting to get to that period of their life where they didn't have a lot to say, and he preferred texting. But I did call him shortly after, and I talked to him, and he sounded really strange. And was saying all kinds of strange things, like kind of paranoid. And I went, uh-oh, here we go. Um,
So when you say
yeah.
he's saying strange things, give me
Uh,
kind of a specific example if you can think of one. Like
well, he's
maybe you'd expect one answer and he gave a different one.
Yeah, I mean, he is a very bright person, always been on top of and it wasn't really political. I mean, we're not going to talk about politics on this show, but we have divergent views, but we could always talk about them. It was strange stuff, like we were talking about climate control and the patterns and how we have to be very careful because he sees in the very near future. He was talking about mass famine, and people having to exit their countries because of not being able to grow crops. And it was very, um, I don't know. And he really felt like this was going to happen like momentarily. It was
So do you
very
think
strange.
he was almost in the midst of, maybe getting all this information from social media, mixing it up with
Yeah,
some,
something.
paranoia maybe, or
Yeah, it was a lot of paranoia.
so
It
you
was
mean he
like a
was
lot of like the world is going to end right now, and he's not like that. He's a well-respected, very intelligent scientist. Everything has always been, I mean, he's kind of been out there on certain things, but you know what? He's been right a lot of it. But he's always been very methodical. Can have a good conversation. Will take your point of view into account. That wasn't happening, and so I thought
and
it
I
was
think that's
strange.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, and this is what I think is so important for people because it's these tiny little indications that retrospectively you can
Mhm.
look at and go, oh, it was right there.
Mhm.
Or I think in your case, you were able to notice something was wrong, notice something was off, and then you took action. So what kind of came to be after that? You notice
Well, I
that?
mean, I talked to my sister a little bit about it, and he, like I said, he didn't like to talk on the phone. So just calling him back, wasn't even a thing. You just
Mhm,
had to text him.
mhm.
He did not prefer to talk on the phone most of his life, actually. So
Yeah.
that part wasn't unusual. But I talked to my sister and I just said, Dad sounds like a little off and all that. Well, she lives in San Antonio. My father and my stepmom live in Galveston, Texas. So she had been going down like every 3 or 4 weeks because my stepmom's been on hospice for over 3 years. So another topic. Um, and she's just going down there helping him renovate some stuff and, just kind of keeping in touch with them. So she said, yeah, I'm going to go down and check on him. And she did concur that something was kind of off and he was stooped over more and, just making just in general, just strange comments. So then in November, I went to Dallas for a meeting and I broke off and to go visit to see them. That was my stepmom's birthday week, the very beginning of November. So I went to go visit. My husband was with me, and even my husband, I mean, he's very observant, my husband, but he usually doesn't say much of anything about things like that. And he came away from it. We were there for a couple of days and he goes, your dad is really going downhill, and had come to find out he had like gone to the hospital for this and that and low iron and all that. And I said, well, maybe he's recovering and all that, but I also had that sense that something was wrong. Well, fast forward to his birthday week, which was December 5th. I went to visit. And on my way to visit, my sister was texting me and letting me know that he was being admitted to the emergency room and went to the ICU for 9 days. Turned out he had a UTI.
So
And
he'd had a UTI this whole time.
I think he did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just
Yeah.
want to go back to what you said about your husband noticing.
Hmm.
I hear this all the time.
Hmm.
It's harder for us that see our parents all the time, or I feel like it's almost we see our parents through this filter,
Hmm.
right? As a child, still seeing their parents, just as we see our children through this filter. You know,
Yes.
I never understood my father saying, I still look at you like you have pigtails in your hair and
Hmm.
you're 3 years old.
Yeah.
Well, it's not until you're a parent of older
Yeah.
children that you go, oh my gosh, I know exactly what he
Yeah.
means.
They're adults now.
Yeah. And so I think the reverse of that is true. You
Yeah.
also see your parents in somewhat of a biased lens.
Yeah.
And so often listening to your significant others or the grandchildren or somebody who doesn't, even if it's a neighbor or someone
Yeah.
who maybe doesn't see that person very often, is a great indicator too that your instincts are right, something's wrong.
Hmm.
Let's explore it a little bit more.
Something. Yes. And, honestly, what makes that difficult, and well, first I'll finish. So anyway, long story short, ICU, 9 days, came home. And then so I went back out again right after Christmas. He did come home. When he came home, did not was not doing well. So the UTI, and that's just something that we will discuss. A lot of people don't know this. And just quickly for everyone who's listening and watching, I have worked with seniors now. Next year it'll be 40 years. So I do know what can a UTI can present like, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't know that with older people, it can be asymptomatic in terms of, feeling it, but they can start doing things like having delusions, having dementia and Alzheimer's like behaviors and thought processes. So
Mhm.
that's what happens. And the sepsis is really, that is a separate thing. So that's just an infection throughout the body. It starts to affect blood pressure and perfusion into the kidneys, and not to get too technical, but basically you poison yourself. That's septic.
Mhm. Mhm.
So he was there, he was septic. And so we were told by several of his colleagues, my father was in brain research for his whole life. We were told by several of his colleagues not to panic too much. He could come back, but it could take months for his cognition to come back.
Oh, wow.
Thankfully, he did start clearing towards the end, but in the end, he did pass on the 26th of January. Um,
I'm sorry.
but he wanted to. So he tried, but he had been in bed for a month with all of this. And so the muscle atrophy, everything was just, it would have been a very difficult road if he could even get to where he could stand on his own or walk on his own.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so I was out there, yeah, the beginning of January, and he was still trying. But then my sister called a few days later and she said, Dad just wants hospice. He just, he's done.
yeah.
So anyway, so that is
So
where I
let's,
have been back
yes.
and forth to Texas. And, but I've been working with seniors for so long and their families, and now their families are like my age. Um, and I've done, I think, a good job of trying to understand where they're coming from, being empathetic, all of that. But now I really know. And there's so much involved. So what I was thinking, Sasha, if it's okay with you, is that we would just kind of just address, because there's a lot involved in this. Um, and I knew that like logistically, but I didn't really understand it. You don't understand. And I'm still going through it. So there's so much involved, with family dynamics and grieving styles and siblings and estate issues and power of attorney and medical issues. And like you're just
Yeah.
thrown into this, and until you've actually really been through it, it's very difficult to understand like all the
A
pieces.
hundred, a
Yeah,
100%. I
all the
couldn't agree with you
pieces.
more. I think this was the part of the catalyst rather for us to start this podcast.
Mhm,
You were going through difficulties with your father, stepmother, and on the other side of it, I have gone through something similar
yeah.
with my family moving after 30 years, moving their home, and
Mhm,
the what that entails, and the fact that you and I both are experts in our industry. This is why
mhm,
we're mavens. I'm
mhm.
a maven in the financial side of these transactions,
Right.
and you're a maven in the senior healthcare. And yet, here we are, two experts getting completely stumped by our own parents.
Yes. Yeah.
So if it can
Not,
happen
yeah.
to us, it
Because you can't
obviously
be an
happens.
expert in everything. And,
Exactly.
you
And
know,
we know so many great experts. And
yes.
that's what really this is about. That's what our
Mhm.
community wants to be about. That's what our podcast is about, is look, we get it. We've got responsibilities and decisions on the children's side of things.
Yeah.
We've got responsibilities, decisions on our parents' side of things. Oh, and by the way, we actually also have our own lives to lead in the middle of balancing those two.
However that happens, I don't know.
Right.
Well, this is part of life, and I think that's why. I mean, so the my whole reasoning for wanting to start this podcast was years ago when my mother passed
Mhm.
on St. Patrick's Day in 22.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just coming up. It'll be 4 years. But she died suddenly, kind of. I mean, she had an
Mhm.
illness, but she just went to bed and then didn't wake up. So that's a different form of grief, I will tell you. And as we kind of get into it a little bit, it's what to me was much harder. And
Mhm. So
but
let's
that
let's let's
that can
pause right
vary.
there, and
Yeah.
let's see where would you like to kind of start with all this? Because I think
So
there's
I
a lot of
think,
great points that you've brought up that we need to address, kind of one by
yeah.
one. Let's get into the weeds
Well, let's do
on a
that.
couple of
Let's
these
start
things.
with, and I did use some chat GPT to help me, like
Yay,
try to
ChatGPT.
organize, because there's so much, so I was like, just help me organize. And I've been using chat GPT, just by the way. I mean, it's a great sounding board, right? Because you don't want to
Yes.
exhaust your friends who could be going through their own stuff. Your poor husband or significant other or whatever, they get tired of hearing it, even though they'll never, the ones that love you will never say it. So I have been using Chat GPT to kind of bounce ideas off and feelings off of, and it's been great. So it's been like a therapist. So now what's
Awesome.
scary is that ChatGPT knows me. So it will, when I say my husband, it'll put in John. Or when I say something like my sister, well, Adriana, so like it knows who I am. So I asked it to do it. So yes, I think the first thing to talk about on parental death is the difference, the shock, and the difference in grieving styles. And you always hear there's no one way to grieve, and all of that. But when you're involved in a family dynamic with the remaining people that are in your life and all of that stress, sometimes you can be a little too hard on yourself. You can be too hard on the other people, for not doing it right.
I was
And
just going to say that
yeah.
the pressure, I think you have there's the social pressure, as you mentioned, to kind of in the lead up, if you have the opportunity in the lead up to their
Mhm.
passing, there's the discussions that sometimes happen in a crisis moment, elevated emotions, um, very, very short time frames to make it really important, critical decisions. And then if you don't have that time frame and everything happens all suddenly, as it happened with your mom,
Mhm.
let's talk about the differences in those two aspects, I guess, from because I remember after speaking with you, I knew something was going on. I knew your dad was not well. And when he finally passed, I obviously sent you my condolences. But I remember saying to you, are you taking a big breath right now? Do you feel a little
Mhm.
bit relieved?
Yeah.
And if I said that to most people, they may be like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, what do you mean
How
relieved?
dare you?
What do you
Right.
mean
Yeah.
relieved? How dare
Even if they
you?
really are feeling that way.
Yes. And the reason is because although I didn't, thankfully, my father had a heart attack but lived,
Mhm.
once we were over that very stressful, emergency, critical situation, and they were in their new home, and because my dad had a heart attack in the middle of moving, um,
Mm.
we the only sensation I can describe to you was relief. I knew
Yeah.
that there was more stress to come, and by no means the discussion of his health or uh, strategy moving forward was over. But
Right.
I felt just a tiny bit of relief, and I knew everything you were going through. So
Mm.
let's maybe kind of talk about that on both of those levels, if you're
Yeah.
if you're
And
up
you're
for
both
it.
your parents are still living, right?
They
Yeah.
are, they
Good.
are, they're
Yeah.
very
Good.
young, which is
Hmm.
terrifying,
Hmm.
terrifying because I'm expecting
Well,
all of this, right? It's
yeah, and
natural.
that's the thing. Like I will tell you, when mother died, she had a condition called pulmonary arterial hypertension for years. And it was discovered along with a congenital heart defect that she never knew she had. She took the news very well and let us know, that at that time they gave her like 3 to 5 years to live. And, so that's kind of far enough along that you don't
Mhm,
grieve like right away. But
mhm.
in the end, she ended up living 9 years from the date of her diagnosis. So
Wow.
I think in our brains, like my sister and I anyway, we kind of had this kind of like you just went, oh, well, maybe she's going to beat the odds. Maybe this
Yeah.
is, because she had lived so far beyond it. And she was towards the end, she needed a little scooter. She had good days and bad days. On her good days, she was out with her scooter shopping, all that. And then the next day, she'd just be on the couch reading, like there was no more mixing those two things. One was busy day, one was not busy day.
Mhm.
But when she did pass, I think Adriana and I, my sister and I, had kind of lulled ourselves into thinking that she was going to be fine because
Right.
she was
Well,
so
but our
vibrant
parents
to the
are
very end.
indestructible. Our
Yeah.
parents are indestructible, right?
Right. And
So
her
that's what children
personality
think
was still
about.
there, and bop, bop,
Mhm.
bop, 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 and Miss Energy. And she got her little scooter. And so she could just go and do whatever she wanted to do. I mean, I did see her slowing down. That's true. So that was difficult. I think that was really hard. Plus, you have the dynamic. So whichever parent you're a lot like, or, I think I kind of equally like both my parents, but that's your mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have a decent relationship with your parents or your mother or whatever, it will affect you. So
Of
that one
course.
was really hard. That took a lot out of me. But the joy was that I enjoyed her up until she came to visit in November. We had a great time. And that's my last time that I was with her. And I had that memory and I was really grateful for that. And she was fine.
Mhm,
She was
mhm,
just doing her thing like she always does.
mhm, mhm.
And with my dad, it was different.
And so let's pause on that just for a
Yeah.
second. Is that how your mom would have wanted things to be?
Yes. Oh, I mean, 1,000,000%. Like my mother was so funny. For years. I would only talk to her maybe every couple of weeks, but it would be like a 2 hour, 3 hour marathon. That's how we
Hmm, hmm,
communicated. My sister, on the other hand, would call her every day, you
hmm,
know.
hmm,
So
hmm.
we're very different
Yeah, different
communication styles.
relationships. Yeah, yeah.
And she would, when I would talk to her, almost always, she would tell me she's been doing some research and she's found ways to die.
Oh,
They
okay.
should, my
That's
mom.
always a great conversation to have with your parents, right?
Well, when she first started doing it, I was like, Mother, this is so morbid. She goes, well, we're all
Hmm.
gonna die, Gabriella. I said, yes, I understand that. Her main concern, though, was she didn't want to be a burden.
Yep.
And she didn't want anyone taking care of her. She didn't want to have to pay anybody to take care of her. And she knows what I do for a living. She knows that it's not cheap. She just didn't want any of that. She didn't want to go into a home, nothing. She didn't want my stepdad having to care for her directly, etc. So we'd have regular conversation. It wasn't just about that. But then, she'd always find a way, if she had found a new way, to get it in there. And she would say, well, the Eskimos do it this way, or you can buy an hibachi and suck out all the oxygen in a room, or, you know, I mean, honestly, I know so many ways to off yourself, and I won't go into it here because I don't want to be responsible for it. Go look it up yourself if you're interested. But anyway, so she did. She really had that approach. She had a very good attitude towards it. She told me, she said, I'm done here. And my kids are fine. You're healthy, you're happy, you're successful. I have lovely grandchildren, but I'm done. I don't really have much else. And she wasn't depressed. She was just like,
Hmm,
I'm done.
hmm.
So that part, when she
So
did
a
pass,
question,
made it easier.
so did that put more, um, it seems as though by her having that, I wouldn't say lighthearted attitude, I would say more of dark humor
Yeah,
about
she had
the
dark humor.
situation,
Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
which frankly, my mom and I can't go to funerals together or we can't sit at funerals together
You
because
giggle.
we get the nervous giggles. And it's not
Yeah.
humorous. We don't get me wrong. It's just
It's
our
a nervous
way.
giggle. It's coping. Mhm.
It's a coping mechanism, absolutely. And frankly, some of the dark humor is also coping
Mhm.
mechanisms, right? For,
Mhm.
yes, I'm fine. Um, but do you think that took some of the burden off of you and your siblings to not worry as much, not
Oh,
stress
yeah.
as much?
Yes, and I think it's very important, as we get to our ending, that we also, I think it's important to convey to your children that you're happy, you're satisfied, that death is not. I don't think, and as I, even now at 56, death isn't as scary to me now as it was, like, say, for instance, when I was in the middle of still raising my children or trying to guide the older ones to better paths, which we'll talk about too. Um, I feel like she did when and in fact, at one point, sorry, I'm like sniffly. At one point, she did tell me when she was about my age, we had a conversation, and she said, and this is her dark humor, but this is kind of her acceptance too. She said, I won't be sad when it's time for me to go. I said, Mom, and I
Oh,
mean, this is before any illness, anything,
mhm,
still
mhm,
vibrant, all that. And I said, Mom, that is so morbid. And she said,
mhm.
No, no, I've been thinking about it. I won't be. She said I was born in 1943. I was raised by a woman who was born in I think Granny was born in 1912 or 11. Uh, I was raised by that. I grew up in 43. We went through the sexual revolution. We went through the 80s. She goes, I don't even know what the world is anymore. Like, I don't understand
Oh,
it. I don't
interesting.
really fit in it anymore. I love you guys. I love spending time with you. But she felt in some ways that her relevance was deeply diminished, but not in a bad way. She had built her life up with her
Mhm.
family, with making herself relevant to us. I mean,
Mhm.
we were her whole life. That's what she did. So she did do that, but she said, I won't be sad. She goes, I'm not going to
Yeah,
miss anything.
yeah,
And
yeah.
she goes, I'll miss you. And I was like, okay.
Wow. I mean,
That was 50.
yeah, that's such a enlightened. I don't know many 50 year
Yeah,
olds having that conversation, but I think you're right. I think one of the sad and tragic aspects of our culture in general is that we don't talk about death,
right.
which is as common as, or more so than anything
It's
else
part of
with a child.
life.
I
Yeah.
mean, exactly.
And we
And
were
it
raised with that. She would tell us that death
yeah,
is part of life.
yeah,
It's the last chapter.
yeah, yeah.
And then of course she would have her morbid humor surrounding that, like what you can do as your last chapter, like your last will and testament, make that fun if you need to, or whatever.
Oh,
But
my dad still to this day says, you know that my check for the funeral director is going to bounce, right?
exactly, I mean,
Um,
that is your final word. You get to do whatever you want to do.
yeah,
And
and to him it was just more about like, I just want to get, I'm going to wring the most out of this life that I can,
yeah,
which is phenomenal, when the
yeah.
parents get to do that. Now, kind of contrast that for us to what just went down with your dad and how,
No.
because you said
And that
it
was
was harder for your mom to go,
It was
but
harder
you're
for my mom to go. And I think too, when you're an adult child, like you said, you always kind of see your parent as your mommy, back in the day. And you and I have had many discussions about our upbringing, very similar. My mom was Canadian, very
Mhm.
strict, very proper. So I think the hardest part for me with her was not actually her death, but it was the death of any more interaction with her, because growing up she was very strict, very proper, and I rebelled very quickly on that. You and I similar. I left home at
We all
17.
did.
Like, yeah, I was like, I'm out of here. I am
Mhm.
not Canadian and I'm going to go live my life. Um, but as we got older and I stopped being always the eternal child in her brain, and she stopped being the very disciplinarian mother in my brain, probably
Mhm.
around the age of 40.
Okay.
Um, she complimented me. I remember just all of a sudden something changed. And
Mm.
so she and I actually became friends, and I saw my mother as a person, not my mother anymore. I mean, always as my mother, but yeah, so that was really nice. And I think I was really mourning that. And then because,
So the adult interaction, the
yeah,
woman to
just
woman kind of
having those conversations and knowing she's been through it before.
right.
You never think your parents have been through anything like you've been through, or you might be
100%.
embarrassed to talk about it, but we're all human and we all go through stuff. And so it was just wonderful. And that's what this Brazen Maven thing is not having that person anymore, who really knew me and that was my biggest fan. I found out later in life she was my biggest fan. Never thought that. She was very critical. But she was just doing the best she thought she needed to do for me.
Right,
Now, the
right.
difference between that and my dad is when he passed, you're absolutely right. I felt just incredible relief. And
And
I
can I just say that's really brave to admit that
yeah,
because
I don't know.
it's so it's so true. It's so true
Mhm.
that we often we we said to each other, this is our space and this is our space for anyone who wants to watch for no judgment,
Yeah.
because that's part of what's difficult. When I said that
Mhm.
to you, do you feel relieved?
Mhm.
I I was a little hesitant because I thought, I hope she doesn't take this the wrong way, but I think I know her well enough now to offer that and have a space for you to verbalize that and kind of just let it out where
Yeah.
potentially you don't have other people that, or that other
understand.
people would judge that and say,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, what does that mean? That you were happy to get rid of him? No, 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 no. That's not what it's about.
Mm-mm.
Let's dive into that a little bit more.
And I think, yeah, you're right. But here's the other thing. I have found that after being 50 for half a decade, I'm past the 55 mark. So I don't really care what people think anymore. I don't. Yeah,
You don't, but lots of people do, and they
I
are
do
in
care,
judgmental
like,
circles.
and that's not all 1,000% true. It's
Yeah.
more like I'm gonna do it my way. I don't know how to do it any other way. And
Yep.
I think
Yep.
that's the bottom line in any grief response.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know how to do it any other way. I think I might have put on airs if I were like 10 years younger.
Mm.
Just to
What do you
try.
mean errors? Like
Just like
false?
trying to put on that face, that
Mm.
mask, that what I think society is expecting from me,
Mhm.
especially being in senior care.
Yep.
That's the other thing. You're in senior care. You're like supposed to be super, and I am. I'm very compassionate, but I mean, you're expected to be super compassionate and this and this and this and this. And I think at a younger time in my life, I might have tried, and that would have been exhausting. And truthfully, I think that it would impede the true grieving process. I think that when people are grieving, my best advice after going through it twice in two different, very different ways with my family, my parents, is that, sorry,
Okay.
sniffles.
It's
I don't know if I have
emotional. It's
allergies
emotional.
or what.
Even if well, and also just talking about this is
Yeah,
emotional.
no,
So
no, it's
it's
just sniffles. Um, I just think that people just need to be honest with themselves. And I think a lot of times people don't know how to be honest with themselves. That's the first thing. But whatever you're feeling, it's right. That's
yeah.
it. It's
So
right. It's
let's talk
okay.
about that actual
Mhm.
physical process that you went through, especially right now with your dad, because I think that was really important what we talked about.
Yeah,
Um,
I
we're
think
both
because,
kind of in the we run our own businesses,
yeah,
and so there's always that pressure of yes, I have this flexibility to do whatever I want whenever I want. However,
really no.
we still have businesses to
No.
run, and we actually have to be more disciplined sometimes than a nine
Yeah.
to five
Yeah.
job. So let's talk about that. What
Okay, well,
that
here's
looks
the
like for you.
difference because you and I, spoiler alert, everybody, we talked about this before, and that's why I think it's really great to open up. I think this whole podcast with death of a parent
Yeah.
because there's so much involved. And in fact, I am working and reaching out to certain experts about other things to kind of bring them in. We can ask them questions, so it's not always going to be about Gabby. Uh, yeah, which, I don't want that to happen, but I do want to share it. And then we're just gonna expand on that with experts and real expertise and advice.
Yep. Yep.
This is my experience. But like everybody has their own relationship with our own parents, and then it's further um depth. I mean, there's more depth into it when you're involving your siblings, step parents, family history, all kinds of stuff. With my dad, he and I have been very close from the very beginning. Actually used to drive my mother mad because they got divorced.
Mhm.
So there was a long history of that I was very much like my father, who was Cuban. He's a Cuban immigrant, very, very successful, well-known scientist in Alzheimer's and dementia and spinal cord, uh, ironically. So anyway, he was very brilliant. He didn't have a lot of time for his family. And he was gone all the time, traveling and so forth. And so my stepmom was a better companion for him. She had no children. She ran his lab. So they kind of had like their own little unit, very enmeshed
Mhm.
unit. And as we got older, it got more and more enmeshed. And they were very in love, but intellectually, they were also very in love. It was a
Mhm.
very strong relationship that way. And so Adriana and I are the daughters, and we go every summer to Galveston, and we'd spend the school year with my mom. And my dad was very diligent. He wrote us at least once a week, always paid his child support, all that kind of stuff. But we had interesting lives. And it was very nice to go see them and be there. And that was our home in the summer. I always consider Galveston my second home. And my stepmom was a great stepmom and all
Mhm.
that. So, but there was a very different dynamic. Obviously, he was a father.
Mhm.
And then he was not there all the time. And I identified very strongly with him from even from birth, my mom said. Just he
Mm.
and I were like two peas in a pod. I valued a lot of what he did. I admired what he did. And so I knew he knew that about me. Also, he admired me building my company. He admired a lot of things about me. So we just had that synergy. So I
Mhm.
think, and my sister did not. So
Mhm.
there was a difference. And I think my
Mhm.
sister was closer to my mother. So you have that dynamic during the grief process when you have, so
Mhm.
I was definitely grieving very differently than my sister. I did a lot of what they call anticipatory grief. When
Mm.
I saw him going downhill, that's when my heart ached because that wasn't my father anymore
Well, and
at all.
I think intellectually you understood that if he was going to go down this route,
Mhm.
it wasn't going to be for very long because he did not want to stay in
No.
that state, right? I'm sure his
Yeah.
medical directives said, DNR, let's
Mhm.
just if this is going to happen, I am not going to be incapacitated in any way, shape, or form.
Exactly. And he was that
Yeah.
way too. He was a lot like my mom. He didn't want to be a burden. He did
Yeah.
not. I mean, my stepmom had been on hospice already for 3 years and he was fine with that. He wore
Yeah.
himself out basically caring for her. And we had
Yeah.
24/7 caregivers for her, but he didn't allow them to do a lot. He was very devoted. And I think in the end, that's what truly took him down. He
Hmm.
just,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, but, and that's not saying it's her fault. It's just, it does happen. And we
It
kept saying,
always,
Dad,
yeah.
let the caregivers do more. And he's like, no, no, no,
Hmm.
I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this.
Hmm.
And they're really just there to keep, her hygiene in order. And really that's all they did for 3 years. Um, so anyway, when I watched him, obviously I was concerned in October and November when I saw him. And then on the 23rd, that's when he really, really started to go downhill. And that's when I decided to go out for his birthday week, the beginning of December. And he called my husband. We were at a restaurant and he called my husband, not me, and said, "You need to talk to your wife and get her under control."
Ah,
I know. I was like,
oh,
"What?"
interesting.
My
Okay.
father would never, ever have said that. He adored women in
Yeah.
general. He
Yeah.
adored his daughters. He adored his wife. He
Hmm.
did not go for that machismo kind of whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
But he was a very private person, and we were meddling because we were concerned about him. But I think he was fully into his UTI by then, looking back.
So
Um,
he
so
was being critical of your directions for caring for him, is
Yeah,
what
and
you're
he
saying.
was like, stay out of my business.
Oh,
Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me when to go to the doctor, all that kind of stuff.
gosh, and that's so hard when
It
it's
is
when you
because
know
you're
they're
watching
sick.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're watching it and they're sick.
Yeah.
So then that was the night my sister got in the car from San Antonio. That night she got to the house at like 1 o'clock in the morning
Because
because
his behavior was so out of character.
it was so out of character.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when you see somebody, I don't know, it depends. Like I said, everyone grieves differently, but I think when you have a parent that is bigger than life, and he was, not just to me, he was to a lot of people.
Hmm.
He was bigger than life. I respected him tremendously. He respected me tremendously. I think when you see somebody that becomes that vulnerable, that fragile, um, it's very different. That's where I really had the trouble. And even now thinking about it, that's what makes me upset. The
Mm,
fact that
interesting.
he got clear in the end, he did.
Hmm.
Thank goodness. So we had some great talks. We watched Forrest Gump. That's one of our favorite movies to watch together, and
Hmm.
Casablanca, which was his
Oh.
all-time favorite movie.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we sat back there when he's just laying in his bed and we watched some movies and I had some wine. He had like a little sip, but he was, not
Yeah.
doing that. But all the things that we love to do together. So we did that and he got clear about the last 2 weeks and he did well and we had great talks and I didn't feel the need to clear anything. I didn't
Mhm.
have issues with my father, so I didn't need
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
But some people do. So
Yep.
great, do
Yep.
that. And then when I left and my sister called me a couple of days later and said he wants hospice, I was like, okay. And so he asked her, he wasn't eating very much, but he asked her to go get caviar, order these Cuban, they're called bolitas, and they're like a potato,
Uh-huh.
mashed potato surrounding a thing, some meat in the middle.
Oh, yes,
So
we have
she,
those in Brazil. Yep. Yep.
okay. So he wanted those. Anyway, he
Uh-huh.
had like a list of things for like a week
Yep.
that she had to go get. And then she made it and he'd have like 2 bites.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then she asked him one day, what do you want today, Dad? And he said, nothing. And he didn't eat all day. So finally, my sisters asked him, are you not eating on purpose? And he said, yep, as clear as day. Just,
Oh,
nope, not going to eat anymore. And that's how he went. He just
wow.
didn't eat, didn't drink. And I have had clients do that. Male
Mhm.
clients, by the way, not females.
Mm.
I've never had a female starve themselves. I don't, I don't know what that is,
Interesting.
but
Yeah,
a man, I have had male clients that they decide it's time and this is going to happen. And he said,
that's
I don't want to do
fascinating.
this
I'd
anymore.
love to, we're going to definitely get experts, as we've kind of
Yes.
mentioned. We both have a myriad of experts in the senior care space
Yes,
that we
we
want to give a
do.
platform to as well.
Mhm.
Um, we're almost finished our hour episode today,
Yeah.
so I don't want to get too into the weeds and all that, but we definitely have to explore that.
Yes.
This end of life phase for people. I know that there's certain states that will do it, obviously Canada. I want to be really careful when we're having those discussions that we're having them with experts in our field,
Yes.
psychological experts, because you and I have like this kind of 40,000 foot view of what happens in the senior care space, but it's a very specific kind of help and mental therapy,
Very
psychological
individual.
therapy, and
It's
very
very
individual.
individual.
Yeah.
I will say I was a little concerned about myself
Mm.
because yes, I was sad, but I was also really glad.
Hmm.
And I just couldn't watch it anymore. I couldn't watch it. I didn't want to see it anymore. I would rather remember him for who he was and not this last part. And I'm so grateful that when he did decline, that it really was just like a 2 month decline, like that it
Hmm.
didn't extend for a long period of time. And he
Hmm.
did that, that he chose to
Hmm.
do that. And I know that.
Hmm.
And I love that about him. That's one of the things I admire is that he decided this is it. I'm not doing this anymore. And he took charge. And that is the last control you have is over your own body,
Right.
what you're going to
Right.
put into it. And so he's smart enough to know that. So,
Yeah.
but I definitely don't want to get in trouble with anybody. I think everybody does their own thing. They grieve their own way. They can use real people. They can use Chat GPT. They can have great friends like I do. I've
Mhm.
had some great friends, but as you said, we are in the senior care space. So even the friends that I have are very understanding that, like you were, about me saying, I mean, do I cry? Yes.
Of
I listened to
course.
2 weeks of yacht rock and just bawled
So,
my
so that's
eyes out.
that's what I wanted to get to because I know what you went through and what you
Yeah.
did purposely for yourself. Let's talk just a little bit more about that before we finish up. What
Yeah.
did you purposely do for yourself after your dad passed?
Well,
What
I
was
didn't
kind of the
intend
decisions
to
you
do it.
made?
I didn't intend to do it, but I have the streaming platforms like everybody on music. And then there was a song, a Carly Simon song that came out. And one of the biggest albums for whatever reason, and because remember, I spent every summer in Galveston, all summer. When we had
Mhm.
real summers, they were 3 months long.
Yeah.
And so I had a whole set of friends out there and everything. So one summer in particular was a fun summer. And Carly Simon was it was an older album, but we had discovered it, all of us, and we were listening to it. I think we were like, I don't know, 13 years old or whatever. And it was No Secrets. And it was, I think, to this day, one of Carly Simon's best albums. But that's the one that has You're So Vain on it, and We Have No Secret. Anyways, a fantastic album. So one of the songs came on, and I just started crying and crying and crying and crying. And my dad would take a lot of time off in the summer. So we did get to spend some time with him. And so then I just looked up yacht rock, and I basically listened to yacht rock for like 2 weeks straight after he died. And slowly but surely, and it's just amazing. So everybody has their thing. Sometimes it's smell, sometimes it's music, sometimes it's whatever. But that music brought back like that whole time period in my history with my father. And I think that I think for most people is a very, very precious time. From about like, I would say like age 6 to like 15, when you finally reject your parents or whatever, but like 6 to 15, especially with dads, and especially with my dad, is a very special time. And it's amazing because here I am 56 years old, so we're talking 50 years later, but I can listen to that music and I can see the putt-putt golf, I can see the beach, I can see like specific things that we were doing. So to me, it was like my own little personal memorial. And I cried
And you
through it, and
also
that's how I grieved.
you also took 7 days. You want to talk about the 7 days?
I did. So there's a movie that's out there that's amazing, and I think it's called Here Is Where I Leave You, or This Is Where I Leave You, and it's Jane Fonda. And her husband dies, and she has 4 children, and she brings them all in. And according to the Jewish tradition, and now I can't remember the name of it. It's the grieving, and according to Jewish tradition, you stay at your home with your family for 7 days. Which honestly, after I did it just by myself, it's an amazing thing. So you don't do anything. You just sit, and then they were having
And let's
people
just
from the
clarify,
neighborhood.
you're not Jewish, right? This is just
No,
something
no,
you
no, no,
learned
no, no.
wanted to kind of emulate, let's say.
I just thought it was an interest. I mean, when I first saw it, the movie a few years ago, I loved the movie, but then I watched it again,
It struck a chord.
it did strike a chord, and I was like, this is so important, I think, for people to sit with their grief. When my mother died, it was during COVID-ish still, and I had to work a lot, and I tend to get myself over busy when I'm feeling bad. It's a workaholic kind of thing.
It's better not to feel and just keep moving through it,
Yeah, just
because
keep on
we'll just
moving.
put that in a little compartment somewhere in the back and get to that later, right?
Yeah. So I decided I was going to do that. And I gave myself permission to not do anything. And I did get up and get dressed in the morning. I can't help it. But I mean, I got up, I got dressed in the morning, but then I would just sit and I would just be, and I would listen to my yacht rock. And then I watched that movie again. And I think that I think, when you look at old religions or old traditions, I think they're there for a reason. I think it was the best thing I ever did. I didn't interact really with anyone. I made no demands of myself, no working out, no working at all, like nothing. And I came out of the week feeling refreshed, feeling like in my own brain, I honored him by listening to all the music and thinking about all the things. I didn't really even talk to my sister much. I didn't really talk to anyone. I just was there and I existed. Now, to say that, like, again, that's worked for me. I don't know if it would work for everybody else, but it's just an idea and it worked for me. And being a very type A personality, I was actually amazed at myself
So
that I
that's what I
was
was going to
able
get
to do
to.
that. Yes,
It's
and I did it
what
comfortably.
most
Yeah,
people don't know, because they don't know about us yet. This is our second episode, is that we're both very type A, where we
yeah.
don't stop just because we're sick. We don't stop just because we hurt our backs. It's like we're doing work on our back, laptop in the air, whatever
Yeah,
we need to
you got to
make it
keep going.
happen.
Yeah.
And so to hear when you told me you took those 7 days, I was a little shocked, because I was like, good for you. And
Mhm.
let's just put it also out there that at our age and time, in terms of what we've got balancing, Your kids are a little older than mine. Mine are 17 and 23. So
Mhm.
I'm still very much a central figure in
Yeah.
their lives. They're both at home. One's going off to college, one's in college, but at home going to college. I don't even know what taking a week off looks like to do that for myself.
I
Now,
remember that. Yeah, I do
you know,
remember. Yeah, there's no way.
even if you're on vacation with family,
Mhm.
as a mom, you're
That's not
still doing.
vacation.
It's still like I just want to really emphasize how precious, what a gift that was to yourself. Um,
I agree.
and my word for this year, we I don't often do this, but my word for this year is grace. And I really truly believe that the reason I chose that was great to have grace for myself,
Mhm.
grace for others. I think we need to have grace in the whole world right now about
Yeah.
everything that's happening, and we're being bombarded on a daily basis
Mhm.
by different media and different stimulation, and whether that's in
Mhm.
real life or virtual life.
Yep.
What an
It's
important
nonstop.
statement. What an important statement to say,
Yeah.
I'm going to stop for 1 week.
Yeah. And I mean that for anyone who is facing the potential of grief or is going through grief, I really think that movie is amazing. It's very funny. It's just about family dynamics. But the permanence of death and the permanence of family dynamics and, you know, choosing to move on or move through or however you do it. I think that's the hardest part about grief because it is so individual. Nobody can tell you how to do it. And on top of that, because it's so individual, it is because it's your interaction with your siblings, your interaction with your parent, your interaction with your parents, significant others like step parents, and, with merged families. But just that part of it is what makes it so messy. But I think
Mhm.
if you can just say it's messy and I'm okay with that,
Right.
it's fine. And
This is
am I
this is a
better?
mess.
No, I'm
This
not.
is a
I
mess
still
we actually
grieve.
don't have to clean up, right? That's the big thing.
Yeah,
It's
it's
it's a
fine.
mess, and that's okay.
Yeah,
That's
it's
okay.
fine. And am
Mhm.
I through it? No. I don't think you're ever done grieving, honestly. I mean, I still miss my mother every day.
Yeah.
But I'm not a mess over it. And
Right.
uh, you know, and I think after 4 years, I hate the word. I think I said it to you, but I can compartmentalize it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
now then that's important to me. For some people, it may not be important to compartmentalize, but for me, it
Right.
is important because I got a lot to do, and I can't let it consume me, but
Right.
I can allow myself to feel it. And then more now it's turned more into sweet memories, an occasional little tear here and there. It's
Yeah.
never going to go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's fine. And actually, I value that grief for my mother because I feel like, in a way, that keeps me still very connected to her emotionally.
Yeah.
So to me, I value the grief, but now I can put it away a little bit. And with
Yeah.
my dad, I can kind of put it away. And I think he would admire, I think he'd like that. That's how he was. He was like, got
Right.
business to do, do your stuff. And I think he was very much like that himself. So it
Mhm.
wasn't that he didn't feel, it was just, he
Different.
was able to put it off for a second and
Yeah.
then pull it out, take a look, have a moment, put it back. And
Yeah.
and I think with the long process for me anyway, with my dad, that was a long process for me. I know it's not a long process for a lot of people, but for me, that was really long and painful. I had done so much grieving before he actually died, that when he died, it was a relief. So, and
Yeah.
that's just my experience. But I think, so that's just like the shock. I think what in the future, in the next episodes, I'd like to focus still on the parental death, if you're okay with
Hmm.
that.
Absolutely.
And because there were some interesting things, obviously, that came up, and so I'll just ChatGPT did organize it for me. So then, just the idea of becoming the next generation
Yep.
in charge. And I
The
remember
matriarch
when
of the family.
Yeah, when I remember when our patriarch from Cuba died, that was my dad's older cousin, Roberto. And we were all hit by that. He was one of my main godparents and just loved him. And he died a few years ago, probably, I want to say like 6 or 7 years ago.
Mhm.
And I remember exactly where I was when my dad told me. I mean, that's how integral he
Wow.
was
Yeah.
in my life. And uh, but I remember my dad saying, because I was crying on the phone, and he was not very comfortable with emotion a lot. But anyway, but he understood. But he
Sure.
said, Gabriella, he goes, the reason I think people get so upset is that when a parent dies, and he was like a parent almost to my dad. He was like 10
Okay.
years older, and he was the oldest Cuban that came over anyway. So when we say patriarch, we mean like Godfather. He
Yeah.
was. So I think when my dad said, when a parent dies, it's you realize you're next. And you're like, oh my God. I mean, that hit me like a ton of bricks because I had already
Yeah.
had no, I hadn't had my mother hadn't died yet.
Yeah.
But then when my mom died, those words came right to my brain. I was like, oh my
Hmm.
God, you're next. And you grow up when you're little, your grandparents die, and you're probably minimally affected. You might be sad if you spend a lot of time. I had very distant grandparents. So, I did cry for my mom. I actually felt bad for my mom. I miss Granny and all that, but yeah. So I think you get kind of adjusted, like but then you lose a parent and you go, oh my God, I'm next. Who's next? And hopefully,
Hmm.
hopefully it's not your
Hmm.
children or anything like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
So that's one thing, just kind of becoming the next generation in charge and being the legacy keeper and being the storyteller and making sure, or not making sure, but, trying to assure that some of your traditions hold. And actually, some of those things have become more important to me.
Hmm.
And then we talked a little bit about the complicated grief, but I think maybe I will reach out to some people about
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And then, how people do it, and we won't do specifics. We'll just kind of have an expert come talk about the interaction with parents and siblings and all of that. And then the practical side. Now, this is the
Hmm.
hardest part. The practical side is the estate chaos to potentially probate frustration, attorneys. There's a lot that goes on that
Hmm.
you get thrown into while you're trying to grieve, and
Yeah. And
it's
then in the
weird.
middle of all this, we
Yeah.
have the younger generation that we're also worrying about, because that
Yes.
doesn't stop just because we're focusing
No.
on the older generation.
Now I'm
So,
a little luckier than you at this stage when it comes to managing those things
hmm.
because my youngest is almost 19.
Right.
So my oldest is 32 and they live on the East Coast. And so I I was able to compartmentalize them. Whatever's going on with them, that kind of
Yeah.
went to the back.
Yep.
And I was really able, and I'm very grateful that I allowed myself and my life situation allowed me to really be in the moment from the
Hmm.
minute I knew my dad was not doing well until he passed. I was in the moment. I think that's really important. And I
Yeah.
think that people don't understand that when they have very busy lives or they don't like to experience those emotions, which I don't. So I think people will try to avoid it by working, by doing whatever they do to avoid things. And I think that the reason that I personally feel so intact right now is that I didn't have that. And I did let the company go a little bit. I got to rebuild that, but I don't regret it for a second. This is a once in a lifetime thing.
I
You
was
lose
just
your
going to say
parents only once.
this is the part where culturally we don't prepare ourselves enough.
Mm,
We don't talk about what an honor it is to be
mm,
able to be present for your parents' last breath, for
mm.
their last week on this planet,
Yeah.
because it is definitely, I've seen a lot of friends have both, as you mentioned, where a parent dies suddenly and you don't have that opportunity to be
Mm,
with them,
yeah.
versus parents hanging on sometimes for longer than you wish them to.
I got one of
Unfortunately,
those.
because You
Well,
don't
because
want
there's
to,
no quality of life for
there's
anyone
no quality
involved,
of life,
and
and everybody.
that's sad. Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But even at that point, I have a particular friend who both parents ended up in hospice situations
Hmm.
pretty much at the same time.
Yeah.
And although I looked at her and went, wow, I know you're exhausted. What can I do? How can I help? That embracing of the moment
Mhm.
was very integral to her process of grieving.
Yeah.
And
And
it seems
I
like it
would
was for
argue
you.
that most people it would be.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the two styles, the sudden death versus the longer death, the anticipatory grief, I think at least for me, a lot of the work was done in the months leading up to my dad's death, as opposed to a lot of the work having to be done after someone's death. And I think that's the difference. But in
Mm.
any event, you have to do it.
You have
You
to go through
have
the
to.
work. Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
to. I remember my sister saying, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And I said to her, you have to. I
Yeah.
mean, and I told you about my first labor with my son, which was 44 hours. And I was exhausted after about 24 hours. And I remember being on the table and looking at my mother and saying, I want to go home. I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And she looked at me and she goes, this is it. You don't have a choice. And I
Mhm.
remember, I think I was 27 years old, almost 28. And I remember looking back at that moment in my life and going, oh my God, I am really an adult now. That's
Yeah.
what being an adult is. That's what this is it. You cannot go home. You gotta have, she
Yeah.
goes, well, you can go home, but you got to have this baby first. Like
Yeah.
this is not an option. It's the same with death. And
Yep.
however you deal with it, you still have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So, but I think I looked at it, like you said, as it's a sacred moment. And I've worked with hospice a lot over the years. I've understood that concept, that philosophy, but I really felt it this time. Like it's so sacred that is my company tanking a tiny bit? Yeah, it is. It's fine.
Mhm.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It'll come
Right.
back.
Right.
My dad won't, and that moment won't ever
Exactly.
come back.
Exactly.
So I don't begrudge it at all. And then of course we want to talk about the physical impact. And there's a lot involved in that. There's the brain fog. I had a lot of brain fog. So I did come home and
Mm.
work. I worked for like 2 weeks and then run off to Galveston again, whatever. But it wasn't effective at all,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
I get a momentum going with marketing and then it got cut off. So you have your brain fog, you have fatigue. I was tired. Looking at yourself like a little differently, like feeling like I'm looking older and yeah, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot.
Mhm.
And then of
Mhm.
course the memory flood, and I talked about that.
Right.
But some of these topics we already really covered, but I do want to when we join up, and you and I will talk offline about that, but let's line up some people to talk about this. Um, because people do, and some people get stuck. We can talk about that, like when the world moves
It's a
on, but
great
you
jumping
don't.
off.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
there's so much in this. Like I said, if I had not gone through this in the last 4 months, I would have intellectually understood it. I've watched it for 40 years, but I would not have, having to still go through it. We're still going through probate. We're still going through
Mhm.
estate stuff. We're still looking at his
Yeah.
will and her will, and then you get like, oh my God, I feel so tacky, I feel so horrible, but these things have to be taken care of. I mean, money
Absolutely.
is a real thing, and if the parents didn't plan right, so we're going to talk about that. And so
Absolutely.
as smart as my dad was, there were some things that he did that I went, what,
Yeah. Yeah.
and everybody will have that. So I
Absolutely.
think we should leave it here,
Yep.
and then you and I, and I'll do like a little outline, and you and I will talk offline, and we'll get some people rounded up that can give us like not as subjective, you
Absolutely.
know.
Well, this was a great,
But I
I'm
appreciate the
happy.
opportunity to share. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say I'm very grateful that you're coming on to share all this because I didn't want to not tell people that this is why we started in October and are now only picking it up in March.
I know.
That's
Can you
not,
believe it?
no, I mean, I
All
can
that
and I
time.
can't, but it just goes to show you how, well, this is life,
Mhm.
and we can make choices of stressing about this or being harsh on ourselves. And like I said, we're going to get into all this. This is what the Brazen Maven Society is all about. So
Mhm.
I'm happy to
Yeah.
share. We'll
And
always,
thank you for allowing me to share. That was kind of nice. It was like a little memorial for me, for my dad.
absolutely. And
Um,
we're going to have,
yeah.
in the description of this, we'll have how to get hold of us.
Mhm.
Please share comments and questions because we want to answer them. That's what we're here
Yeah.
for. If people need to be put in touch with certain organizations, we can also
We
help
can
with
help.
that. Yep. So thank you
And
for being
oh,
so
and then just
vulnerable.
one other thing before, because we were talking about grieving. One thing very important to understand that you and I are probably aware, I'm very aware of it, is that no matter what, no matter who died, whether they were on hospice or not, every hospice organization has bereavement services available to anyone affected by a death for 13 months after that person's death.
That's amazing.
And I recommended it, of course, to my sister. She is using it. She's having a different path, a
Hmm.
difficult time.
Hmm.
And I encourage everyone, and they don't even have to have been on hospice. You can just call a hospice and ask for help, and chaplain will come out and see you. And it doesn't even need to be denominational. It's just a spiritual guide for
And
you to talk to.
we'll put that in our
I'll put that
description
on the
too,
show
because
notes. Yeah.
I think that's super
Yeah.
important. So
In
thank
fact,
you,
I'll do
Gabby.
like some like a national association for hospice and home health or something like that, just so that
Perfect.
there's like, if we get like a million viewers across the United States, everybody can go to their local hospice.
There you go. Well,
Okay.
thanks for being vulnerable, Gabby. It
All
was
right.
great talking to you. And this
Same.
time next week.
Yes. Oh, actually, yes. Yeah, I'll talk to you about that offline.
Alrighty.
Okay. All right. Okay. Talk to you later.